"Get out of my car, useless old trash woman. I own everything now." Her scream tore through the storm as Audrey shoved the door wide open, the cold rain pelting my face like needles. My body gave way under the sudden force, and I collapsed onto the slick asphalt, my palms sinking into freezing mud. The taste of grit and rainwater filled my mouth while headlights from passing cars streaked across the wet road, turning me into nothing more than a discarded shadow. My coat clung heavy with dirt, the silk of my dress soaked through until it pressed against my skin like ice. I tried to steady my breath, but it came ragged, mingled with the pounding of rain against metal. Inside the car, music blasted, cheerful and vulgar, as if my humiliation were no more than background entertainment to her. Audrey leaned out for one last look, her red lips curled in triumph, before she slammed the door shut. I caught a glimpse of my son's blurred figure in the back seat, head bowed, bottle still in his hand. He did not move, not even when I raised a trembling hand toward him. The car's tires hissed on the wet pavement, carrying them away, leaving me alone in the dark. Through the fogged window I saw Maxwell, my only son, the boy I once held to my chest when storms frightened him as a child. His eyes were bloodshot, his breath heavy with the sour scent of alcohol, yet he was not so far gone that he could not see me lying there in the rain. For one aching second our eyes met, and I thought I glimpsed a flicker of shame, a spark of recognition that I was his mother, not some stranger abandoned on the road. But he did not move. His hand stayed limp on the bottle resting against his leg, his lips pressed tight, as if silence could erase the crime. Audrey leaned over, her perfume wafting even through the rain, her voice sharp with scorn as she told him not to grow soft, that I was nothing but a burden. My son turned his face away, the muscles in his jaw trembling, but still he obeyed her silence. My chest burned with betrayal, and it was not the icy mud that cut deepest, but the void where his voice should have been. I had endured years of storms, of loss, of grief, but never had I known a wound so bitter as watching my child choose cowardice over blood. The car's wipers scraped across the windshield, a cruel rhythm to my despair, and I realized in that moment that loneliness could live even inside a family that once was mine. My body trembled, but a strange calm spread through me as the rain pressed harder. The fortune that should have protected our name no longer lay safely in my hands, and the woman inside that car believed she had claimed it forever. Yet what she did not know, what no one in that moment could guess, was that not all signatures tell the same story. Somewhere between the paper I signed and the paper she holds, a sliver of truth still waits, sharp enough to cut through her triumph. I let the mud swallow me for a breath, masking the flicker in my eyes. To her I was ruined, discarded, powerless. The car sped away, its tires hissing against the drenched asphalt, taillights dissolving into the curtain of rain. I remained collapsed on the road, the chill of wet stone seeping into my bones, the taste of mud lingering on my lips. My breath came in short bursts, fogging the air in front of me, until at last I forced my hands to press against the ground and lift my body upright. The rain drummed steady, falling harder with each second, soaking through my clothes until they clung heavy and cold. My fingers curled into fists, trembling not from weakness but from a new pulse rising in my chest. I lifted my face into the downpour and let the words burn through the night. They think they have erased me, but they do not know. This is only the beginning. The rain that clung to my skin blurred into memory, and in that shifting haze I saw my husband, Nicholas Prescott, again. He was tall and certain, the man who had built an empire with steady hands and relentless vision. I remembered the boardrooms where his voice carried weight, the late nights when his pen still scratched across papers long after others had given up. When he died, the silence in our home was crushing, and the world outside whispered about fortune and power, as if numbers could replace a heartbeat. He left me 60 million in company shares and a 20 million estate, wealth that seemed dazzling to outsiders. They saw me, Amelia Prescott, as a woman cocooned in luxury, a widow secured for life. What they did not see was the weight of his absence and the solemn promise I made at his grave. This fortune was not mine to squander, It was the legacy of a man who built it for the future of our son. Each signature I placed, each decision I took, carried his shadow beside me. At times I would walk through the halls of the estate and hear his laughter faint against the marble, a reminder that my role was not indulgence, but guardianship. Responsibility was my true inheritance, the duty to keep safe what he had left behind until our son Maxwell could claim it with his own strength. I did not know then that the very blood of my family would rise against me, that love and loyalty could turn so easily into greed. Maxwell had always been bright, quick to learn, curious about the world, yet behind his sharp mind was a fragility that I could never mend. After his father's death, that weakness grew into a shadow that swallowed him whole. He reached for the bottle as if it were the only hand left to hold, pouring glass after glass until his words slurred and his laughter turned hollow. Each evening I would find him in the living room, the curtains drawn tight, the air heavy with whiskey and silence. His eyes no longer searched for tomorrow. They stared blankly into the dim glow of the television, as if the future no longer belonged to him. I begged him to stop, my voice breaking with both anger and love, but my words slid off him like water against stone. I prayed in the still hours of night, asking for strength to save him, yet every morning I woke to the same despair. My only son, the heir to a fortune built on sweat and vision, now wandered without direction, stripped of will and strength. His weakness made him an open mark, the kind of man others watch with calculating eyes. More than his money, it was his fragility that invited predators, turning him into easy prey for the cruel schemes whispered around him. My daughter-in-law, Audrey, was once admired as the queen of public relations. In the corporate world, her name was spoken with respect because she understood how to control every image and every message. She knew exactly how to organize press conferences, how to charm reporters, and how to make headlines sound favorable to her clients. She also knew her way around financial documents, using them to influence investors and give the companies she represented a sense of power and security. For a few years, she stood at the top of her field, confident and glamorous. Then she left the corporate world and tried to build something even more personal. Audrey opened a chain of luxury boutiques, believing she could reinvent herself as a fashion queen. She dressed in expensive clothing, posed for cameras, and appeared on the covers of magazines. At first, it seemed she had succeeded. Customers crowded her stores and the media celebrated her as a new icon of style. But the success was short-lived. A fashion blogger investigated her boutiques and discovered that many of the bags and dresses she sold were fake products. The story spread quickly. Customers demanded their money back, lawsuits were filed, and creditors demanded payment. Within a few weeks, the business collapsed. Her name, once glowing in lights and magazines, became linked only with shame. Audrey was left with nothing but anger and desperation. The fall of her boutiques left her reputation destroyed and her future uncertain, and in that emptiness, she began to look for something even bigger to take. Audrey's fall should have ended her, but instead it awakened something darker. Failure did not break her pride, it only sharpened her hunger. She could not bear the thought of fading from society's memory, of being remembered as the woman who sold counterfeit clothes. She decided she would rebuild herself, but this time she wanted more than boutiques and magazine covers. She wanted power, the kind that only money could buy. Tens of millions of dollars would be needed to polish her image, to buy her way back into the circles that had turned their backs on her. So she turned her gaze toward our family fortune. Every smile she gave Maxwell, every soft word she whispered in his ear, was part of her calculation. She knew his weakness, knew he would cling to her as if she were the last rope holding him above despair. And she played the role of savior, while her eyes were fixed on the $80 million that Nicholas had left behind. In her presence, I was no longer a mother-in-law, but an obstacle, a barrier to be pushed aside. I could see it in the way she watched me, polite on the surface but cold beneath. Her desperation had become ambition, and ambition has no limit when it is fueled by shame. That was the seed of every disaster that followed. I went to the bank that morning believing it would be nothing more than a routine visit. For years, I had walked through those glass doors to authorize the same annual disbursement from the family trust, and nothing had ever changed. The marble floor gleamed under the lights. The scent of polished wood lingered in the air, and for a moment I felt the same calm I always did when handling Nicholas's legacy. Then the receptionist looked up at me, her smile uncertain, her voice breaking slightly as she asked whether I wanted to use the authorization form I had submitted previously. My stomach clenched. I had never signed such a form. I asked her to show me the document. She hesitated before sliding the copy across the counter, her eyes flicking toward me with concern. I picked it up with hands that already trembled. There, bold across the bottom line, was my name. It looked close enough at first glance, but the more I stared, the clearer the deception became. My real signature flows with ease, years of practice turning each letter into a graceful curve. This one was heavy, clumsy, the strokes uneven and cold. Someone had tried to become me on paper, and the attempt was terrifyingly deliberate. In the corner was a notary seal. I leaned in, studying the stamp, but it bore the name of a firm I had never worked with, a place that surely existed only to lend credibility to a lie. My chest tightened, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Someone had walked into this bank with forged documents, intent on stripping me of everything Nicholas had trusted me to guard. The receptionist said nothing more, but I could sense her unease. I folded the paper carefully, hiding my shaking hands in the folds of my coat. I thanked the young woman with a composure I did not feel, and I walked out beneath the gray sky. The rain had started again, soft at first and then steady, tapping against my umbrella like a metronome of dread. Each drop seemed to echo the same truth. The theft was not coming. It had already begun, and from this moment forward nothing in my life would ever be safe again. When an enemy dares to forge my signature, it means they already have a shielded network behind them, hidden and waiting. That thought haunted me as I left the bank with the false papers burning in my bag. My steps faltered when I saw Audrey across the street. She moved with confidence, her heels clicking against the wet pavement as she entered a luxurious restaurant. At her side was a financial broker, tall, well-dressed, his presence too close to be innocent. They were shown to a corner booth, and instead of sitting across from one another, they slid into the same side of the table. His arm rested lightly on her shoulder, their bodies angled together, their laughter low and private. No colleague behaves that way. They were partners not only in business but in betrayal. I stood under the rain, half shielded by my umbrella, and raised my phone. The soft click of the camera felt like thunder in my chest. Frame after frame, I captured their intimacy, each picture colder than the last. My son's voice echoed in my memory, his drunken plea that I stop making things difficult for his wife, that she was only protecting the family's future. The cruel irony twisted inside me. That future was not meant for Maxwell, not for our blood. It was meant for the man beside her, the one she leaned into with practiced affection. I clenched my phone until my knuckles ached. The truth had revealed itself too clearly. My fortune was not feeding loyalty or love. It was feeding a lie, a glamorous mask, and a sordid affair. That night I returned home with the forged papers still heavy in my bag, determined to confront my son. I found Maxwell slumped at the dining table, the room dim except for the yellow glow of a single lamp. A half-empty bottle of whiskey sat before him, the sharp smell filling the air, his eyes swollen and red from drink. I placed the document on the table with trembling hands, sliding it toward him so he could not ignore it. For a moment he stared, his gaze blurred. Then he shook his head slowly as if the truth itself were too heavy to bear. "Mother, stop making things so hard for Vanessa," he muttered. "She is only thinking about our future." The words struck me harder than any betrayal could. Our future, he called it, as if the fortune built by his father's sweat and vision now belonged to her. My throat closed, my voice trapped behind anger and grief. I wanted to shout, to tell him of the photographs, the lies, the affair, but I saw how tightly his fingers clutched the glass, how much of himself he had already surrendered. My son was no longer my defender, no longer the heir I had raised. He was a prisoner, bound not by chains but by a bottle and a woman's manipulation. This year, Audrey announced she would host a birthday celebration for me, a gesture that surprised many, including myself. She chose a glittering ballroom at a luxury hotel, its chandeliers spilling light across polished floors, the air filled with the hum of expensive perfume and whispered gossip. Reporters, socialites, and wealthy acquaintances crowded the room, eager to capture every detail of her performance as the dutiful daughter-in-law. Audrey appeared flawless in a silk gown, her arms slipping around my shoulders as cameras flashed. She raised a glass of champagne high, smiling as though the night was about honoring me, but I could feel the calculation in every move she made. Her speech was sweet and rehearsed, praising family and loyalty, her voice thick with false devotion. Guests applauded, believing they were witnessing affection, but I knew the truth. This party was her stage, not my celebration. The real purpose was to flaunt her glamour and to press drink after drink into my hand until I lost control. I lifted the glass only once, touching the wine to my lips, then set it down calmly. Audrey leaned close, urging me softly to drink more, her tone sharp under the velvet. I met her gaze with a quiet smile, steady and unyielding. The alcohol never touched me, and her plan unraveled before her eyes. For a fleeting instant her mask slipped, her eyes flashing with anger, and I knew she realized she had failed. After the glitter of the birthday party had faded, the house felt too quiet, too hollow. I lay in bed restless, my mind replaying every false smile, every forced word of praise from Audrey. Past midnight I gave up on sleep and wandered downstairs, the air heavy with silence. That was when I heard it. A metallic scrape, sharp and deliberate, breaking the stillness. The sound came from the garage. I froze, my pulse racing, then crept closer, my feet careful on the cold floor. Through the narrow crack of the door I saw him, the new housekeeper Audrey had insisted on hiring. His posture was low, secretive, his hand clutching a wrench that glinted under the dim light. He was crouched beneath my car, the rhythm of metal against metal steady and cruel. Each clang made my stomach knot tighter. His face shone with sweat though the night was cool, his eyes darting nervously as though expecting to be caught. He looked less like a worker doing repairs and more like a man carrying out orders he dared not disobey. My breath caught in my throat, and I pressed a hand against my chest to keep silent. Instinct screamed that this was no accident, no late-night maintenance. Something far darker was unfolding. In that shadowed moment I understood. Danger was already inside my home. The next morning I rose before anyone else, my body still heavy with dread. I moved quietly to the study where the security system was kept, my fingers cold as I typed in the passcode. The screen flickered to life, and with it came the truth I had feared. The footage from the night before showed the servant crouched beneath my car, tools glinting under the dim garage light. Slowly, methodically, he loosened bolts and clipped wires, each movement precise. Then he paused, pulled a phone from his pocket and whispered into it. His words were faint but chilling. "It is done. Do not let her suspect." My breath caught, and I felt my pulse roar in my ears. This was no prank, no careless mistake. It was murder planned in advance, wrapped in secrecy and malice. My chest tightened, but my mind sharpened. I reached for the keyboard, saving the file to a hidden drive, my hands trembling even as I forced them steady. I replayed the clip once more, memorizing every gesture, every shadow on his face, knowing it was proof that could not be denied. As the image froze on the screen, I pressed my palms flat against the desk and steadied myself. Fear still clung to me, but a new resolve began to burn through it. They had crossed a line, and from this moment forward, I would not wait quietly for my end. I forced myself to move through the motions as if nothing had changed. The car keys jingled lightly in my hand while I stepped into the garage, humming a tune to disguise the tremor in my voice. Before touching the door handle, I glanced at the corner where the hidden camera still blinked, then turned toward the mechanic I had trusted for years. He arrived quietly, no uniform, only a small flashlight and a wary expression. I nodded, and he crouched down, sliding his light beneath the car. For a moment there was only silence, the beam tracing over steel and rubber, until his breath caught. He looked up, his face drained of color. "Madam," he said, "the brakes have been tampered with. If you drove this car, you would lose control within minutes." His words struck harder than the rain the night before. My knees weakened and I sank into a chair, the weight of truth pressing on my chest. It was no longer about wealth, no longer about forged signatures and stolen contracts. This was about ending me. My heart pounded against my ribs, each beat echoing like a drum of fury. I stared at the car, once a symbol of freedom, now a weapon sharpened against me. In that moment, fear and rage braided together, and I knew I was no longer merely a victim. That night the house was silent, the kind of silence that presses against the walls and seeps into the heart. I sat alone in the living room, the soft glow of a single lamp casting long shadows across the carpet. On the mantel stood the framed photograph of Nicholas, his steady eyes and calm smile watching me from the past. My voice cracked as I whispered to him, "Rest easy, my love. I will not allow them to destroy what you built." For too long I had carried fear like a weight on my back, shrinking into myself while others plotted around me. But in that stillness, fear shifted. It became iron in my spine, fire in my chest. I thought of the forged documents, the broken brakes, the lies whispered into my son's ear, and I felt something inside me harden. They did not only want the money, they wanted my silence, my life, my erasure. And because of that, they had awakened the part of me I thought was long buried. I pressed my hands together tightly, staring into Nicholas's eyes, letting his memory strengthen my resolve. No longer would I sit quietly, waiting for the next strike. This was the moment the balance changed. I would not be the prey they imagined. I would become the hunter. In the days that followed the break incident, I realized I could no longer lean on the people under my own roof. Family ties had become poisoned, and trusting them would only hasten my fall. Still, I was not without allies. I reached out first to my husband's longtime attorney, a man who had managed the trust for decades and knew every corner of our estate. His voice on the phone carried the same calm authority Nicholas once had, and I felt a measure of steadiness return. Next, I called a banker I had known for years, the very man Nicholas had once rescued from financial ruin. Gratitude is a bond stronger than any contract, and he promised me his discretion and support. Finally, I hired a private investigator whose reputation was built on exposing fraud and corporate theft. He spoke little, but his eyes told me he had seen this kind of treachery before. The three of them formed a circle around me, invisible to outsiders, but strong enough to give me hope. Together they became my hidden network, a shield against the schemes closing in. For the first time in weeks, I no longer felt like a cornered widow. I felt like a woman preparing for war. Piece by piece the truth emerged, each fragment darker than the one before. My husband's attorney was the first to return with confirmation. The authorization form that bore my name was not mine at all. The signature, though skillfully imitated, had been declared a forgery, and the notary seal at its corner belonged to an office that did not even exist. It was a ghost company, created only to give false legitimacy to theft. His voice was steady as he explained, but I could hear the quiet anger beneath it. This was not only criminal, it was deliberate deception aimed at stripping me of Nicholas's legacy. Soon after, the banker called me into his office. Behind closed doors, he slid a folder across the desk. Inside was the record of a $60 million transfer order, frozen in the system because of suspicious activity. Someone had tried to move nearly the entire value of the company shares into another account, but the safeguards Nicholas had insisted on years ago caught the irregularity. If not for those protections, the fortune would already be gone. My fingers shook as I closed the file, but a surge of grim satisfaction rose in me. At least some part of my husband's foresight still shielded us. The investigator was the last to deliver his report, and it was the hardest to hear. He laid out photographs of the car's brake system, bolts loosened, wires cut, all arranged with surgical precision. The evidence left no doubt. This was not negligence or error. It was attempted murder, plain and cold. My chest tightened as I stared at the images, knowing how close I had come to vanishing in what would have been dismissed as an accident. But the most devastating blow came when he produced a series of recovered emails from Audrey's computer. My breath caught as I read the words exchanged with the broker she called her partner. Just 20 million more, and Paris will be ours. The words dripped with betrayal, casual and intimate, as if my son's life, my family's name, and my very survival were nothing but obstacles to their escape. Forgery, fraud, infidelity, and attempted murder. Each piece stacked upon the next until the picture was undeniable. I felt the ground shift beneath me as the puzzle completed itself. They had plotted not only to rob me, but to erase me. Yet holding those files, I also felt a new strength. The evidence was now in my hands, and with it, the first true weapon of my own. The investigator's final delivery left no room for doubt. He laid out glossy photographs of Audrey with her lover, taken in the lobby of a five-star hotel, their hands entwined as if they had nothing to fear. Alongside them was the receipt for a suite, signed in her name, the dates matching perfectly with the weekend she had told Maxwell she was away on business. Next came the airline tickets and bank statements for a trip to the Maldives, a getaway wrapped in lies, each document confirming the other like pieces of a cruel puzzle. The folder he handed me was thick, its cover stamped with words that chilled and strengthened me all at once. Fraud, elder abuse, forgery, attempted murder. I traced the letters with my fingertips, feeling the sharp edge of their meaning. Every item inside was a blade, honed to cut through her web of deceit when the time came. The weight of it settled in my lap as I realized the choice before me. If I delivered this to the police, to the courts, Audrey's fall would be swift and absolute. There would be no more masks, no more charm to hide behind, only chains, headlines, and disgrace. My pulse slowed, steadied, as I closed the folder. For the first time in weeks, I felt the ground beneath me solid. Her fate was sealed. All that remained was to decide when to strike. In the quiet of the attorney's office, I signed papers that reshaped the future of my estate. Together, we rewrote the will in absolute secrecy, transferring the bulk of Nicholas's fortune into a trust fund built like a fortress. It was a structure no fraud could pierce, no forged signature could touch. Maxwell, my broken son, was granted only a modest inheritance, small properties, a steady allowance, just enough to sustain him, but never enough to throw away under Audrey's influence. The crucial appendix, the one that held the truth of where the real wealth rested, was locked away with the lawyer, far from the greedy eyes that prowled my household. I left the office without a word to Maxwell or Audrey. Silence was my ally now. I let them believe they had swallowed the entire 80 million, that I had signed away every last piece of Nicholas's empire. Their smugness grew each day, Audrey smiling more broadly, Maxwell drifting further under her spell. They thought I was beaten, cornered, stripped of everything but dignity. That illusion was the final snare. Behind the curtain of their confidence, I waited. I imagined the gala Audrey had been planning for weeks, her triumphant return to society's stage, the night she intended to wash her sins away with lights, champagne, and applause. She would step into that ballroom certain she had won, certain the fortune was hers. What she did not know was that the stage she built for her victory would become the place of her downfall. My evidence was ready, my allies in position. All I had to do was wait for her to invite the world to watch her ruin. Now, back in the present, the rain hammered down as I lay crumpled on the pavement, the cold seeping through my dress until every bone ached. Audrey's cruel laughter still echoed in my ears, fading with the roar of the car that had left me behind only moments ago. For a heartbeat I thought I would not rise, that perhaps this was how she intended my story to end. But then a shadow fell across me, steady and calm. My husband's lawyer appeared, stepping into the storm with quiet certainty. He bent down, opening an umbrella above my head, his hand offering a clean towel. He pulled me gently to my feet, his voice low but firm. "It is time, madam. Everything is ready. I pressed the towel against my face, wiping away mud and rain, forcing my breath to steady. The fury inside me cooled into something sharper, calmer. My eyes, once clouded with humiliation, grew clear again. I straightened my shoulders, feeling the weight of resolve settle over me like armor. Around us, the city lights shimmered in the storm, but all I could see was the path ahead. Tonight at the gala, their stage would become my battlefield. What Audrey believed would be her night of triumph would instead decide her fate. I drew one final breath of rain-soaked air, knowing the moment of reckoning had come. The ballroom glittered beneath 1,000 lights, chandeliers casting diamonds of brilliance across polished marble. Reporters crowded the aisles, their cameras firing in rapid bursts, each flash catching a moment of spectacle. Then Audrey appeared, draped in a white couture gown that floated around her like a cloud. The fabric shimmered under the lights, her smile wide and triumphant, the picture of a woman reborn. She raised her chin, pausing to bask in the attention, then lifted her voice so that every corner of the hall could hear. "I have returned, stronger than ever." The words rolled off her tongue with perfect confidence, practiced and rehearsed, and the audience responded with a thunder of applause. Glasses clinked, admirers leaned forward, and the air swelled with admiration. Yet beneath the dazzling show lay the truth only I carried. Her radiance was a mask, her strength a lie, her empire already crumbling under the weight of deceit. I watched from the shadows as Maxwell sat beside her, his tuxedo ill-fitted, his glass of whiskey half empty. He tried to smile when the cameras found him, but the effort could not hide the emptiness in his eyes. He looked less like a husband and more like a prop, a broken man displayed to complete her illusion. Around them the music rose, the applause rang out, but all I could hear was the hollow sound of false glory. I walked slowly toward the stage, each step measured, the storm of camera flashes lighting my path. The ballroom hushed, curiosity rippling through the crowd. I did not raise my voice, did not need theatrics. Calmly, I let the words fall into the silence. Everyone here deserves to know the truth. My lawyer stepped forward, placing the thick folder in my hands. With a nod, the projector hummed to life, and on the great screen behind me the story unfolded. First came the forged documents, my signature stiff and false, stamped with a phantom notary seal. Gasps rose from the guests. Then the footage of the garage appeared, the servant crouched beneath my car, wrench in hand, tampering with the brakes. Murmurs swelled into shocked cries. Next, the emails scrolled across the screen, words of betrayal exchanged between Audrey and her lover. Just 20 million more, and Paris will be ours. Images followed, photographs of hotel lobbies, intimate gestures captured by the investigator, receipts and tickets linking their so-called business trips to secret affairs. Finally, the Maldives invoices glowed under the lights, undeniable proof of their indulgence funded by stolen wealth. The crowd erupted in whispers, the sound like waves crashing against marble walls. All eyes turned to Audrey. Her proud smile had vanished, replaced by a face drained of color. Her hands clutched her wineglass so tightly it trembled, liquid spilling over the rim. The queen she had tried to portray crumbled under the weight of truth. The lawyer's voice rang clear across the ballroom, carrying authority that cut through the chaos. "Ladies and gentlemen, every piece of evidence you have just seen has already been submitted to the police and the court." The words struck like a hammer. In that instant, the doors burst open, uniformed officers stepping into the light of the chandeliers, their badges gleaming, their expressions firm. Cameras whirred wildly, capturing every second as the lead officer unfolded the warrant. "Audrey Prescott, you are under arrest." The room froze, then erupted into gasps. Audrey staggered backward, her face twisted in disbelief. "No, this is a lie!" she screamed, her voice cracking as she shook her head. Panic overtook her, and in a frenzy she pushed past the tables, shoving guests aside. Flashes followed her desperate flight through the hall. She burst through the doors into the stormy night, heels slipping on the wet ground. On the lawn the inevitable came. Her feet slid, her arms flailed, and she crashed into the mud. The pristine couture gown she had flaunted only moments ago clung to her in disgrace, soaked and filthy. The fashion queen the world once admired was reduced to a spectacle of humiliation. Inside, I remained still, watching through the glass doors. My hands no longer trembled, my voice no longer faltered. This was the ending she had written for herself. The downfall of greed had finally begun. The next morning, the city awoke to a storm of headlines. Every newspaper stand was plastered with the same humiliating image: Audrey sprawled face down in the mud, her once pristine couture gown stained and ruined. The captions screamed in bold black letters: Fashion Queen exposed, fake goods, $80 million fraud, infidelity, and murder plot against mother-in-law. Television anchors delivered the story with solemn voices, while behind them screens replayed the footage of officers snapping cuffs around Audrey's wrists under the glitter of gala lights. The scene looped again and again, a spectacle of disgrace broadcast into living rooms and cafes across the country. Social media roared with outrage and ridicule. Hashtags trended within hours, millions of clicks and shares dragging her name deeper into infamy. Influencers mocked her fall, news sites dissected every detail of her schemes, and even fashion magazines that once praised her now printed scathing essays. The empire she had built on charm and deceit collapsed in a single night, leaving only fragments for the world to laugh at. I watched the coverage in silence, not with triumph, but with clarity. Justice had stripped away the mask she wore, and now the truth was a weapon no one could return to her. Every flash, every headline, every share was a knife slicing through the illusion she had fought so hard to preserve. The downfall did not end with Audrey. Within days, her accomplice, the financial broker who had been both her partner in crime and her lover, was dragged into the light. Police raided his office, seizing computers, hard drives, and phones, every device a vault of corruption. Investigators uncovered trails of suspicious transfers, coded emails, and shell companies designed for laundering money. Each click of evidence unraveled years of deceit, exposing him as not just a participant, but a mastermind in schemes that bled millions. His license to practice was revoked immediately, stripping away the career he once flaunted. The headlines that once praised his sharp instincts now branded him a fraud and a criminal. Former colleagues distanced themselves, business partners cut ties, and friends who once admired his success vanished as quickly as his fortune. In whispered circles, he was no longer respected, only despised, a cautionary tale of greed consuming itself. The network of lies he and Audrey had built, polished and hidden behind a veil of luxury, collapsed piece by piece under scrutiny. Where once there was a web that trapped others, now only broken threads remained, scattered in the open for the world to see. After the gala, when the lights had faded and Audrey's downfall filled every headline, the house fell into a heavy silence. It was the night after her arrest that I found Maxwell in his room, a broken figure amid the stench of spilled liquor. The bottle had rolled to the corner, its contents soaking the carpet like a shadow that could not be scrubbed away. He lifted his head when I entered, his eyes swollen and red. "Mother, I defended the wrong person," he sobbed, his voice trembling with despair. "She betrayed me too." His words carried the weight of a man crushed by both addiction and betrayal. I crossed the room without hesitation, ignoring the staleness of alcohol that clung to him. I wrapped my arms tightly around him, holding him as I had when he was a child seeking shelter from a storm. His tears soaked into my shoulder, each drop a reminder of the boy he once was, the boy I believed I could still save. My voice shook but stayed firm. "You have fallen, my son, but there is still a way back. I will not leave you behind." The next morning, just 2 days after the gala, I acted. Together with my lawyer, I arranged for Maxwell to be admitted to a rehabilitation clinic, a place where his body could be cleansed and his spirit might begin again. Signing the papers was both painful and necessary. Watching him walk through those doors, fragile yet willing, I knew this was the only path left. It was not forgiveness of the past, but it was the beginning of redemption, for him and perhaps for me as well. The mansion was quiet, almost too quiet. the kind of silence that followed a storm. Beyond the wide glass doors, the sky was still heavy, clouds slowly parting to reveal pale streaks of sunlight. I sat alone in a low chair, the soft glow of a single lamp beside me. No flashing cameras, no glittering gowns, only the stillness of a woman left with her memories. I lifted a glass of red wine, the dark liquid catching the light, and for a moment I saw in it all the bitterness I had swallowed. They underestimated age, I thought, but wisdom and experience are sharper than any blade. Images flickered in my mind: the night I was thrown into the mud, Maxwell's tearful confession, Audrey collapsing in the rain, her white dress ruined, her glory turned to shame. The drama was over, yet the ache it left behind remained. I had kept my life, my dignity, and even my son, but I could not answer the question that haunted me. Does victory ever truly equal happiness? A hollowness spread through me, a reminder that power and money could not fill the cracks of family broken by betrayal. I looked out through the glass once more. The rain had passed, the clouds gave way to faint sunlight. The world seemed to whisper of new beginnings, though the path ahead would not be easy. If this story touched you, take a moment to pause. We cannot always stop greed from entering our lives, but we can choose to guard our dignity and peace. Share this story to remember that true victory is not measured in wealth, but in holding to our values when betrayed. And if a dream still lies buried within you, perhaps tonight is the time to let it speak.